Hey everybody, this is Kathleen Moss, and you're listening to A Breast Cancer Diary. Happy Pinktober, everyone. I hope you're faring well with the onslaught of pink and pink ribbon and pink commercialization, as well as pink community and pink hugs and pink love. There is so much on both sides of that spectrum. I hope you're experiencing more of the good stuff. I'm here today to talk about last week's episode with Meryl, my friend Meryl Opsal. She had so much to say and she had so much passion in her story. Just want to review some of the things that we learned from Meryl and some of the things that might have been confusing and clear up a couple of things and maybe send you some resources if you want to explore more about her particular phenomenon of immunotherapy turned into an immune disorder. So the main part of Meryl's story that I really wanted to hear personally was her use of Keytruda. Keytruda is a new drug. It was developed for cancer, but not first used in the breast cancer realm. It was first used really successfully in the melanoma, so the skin cancer realm. And Keytruda has been a drug that has been really acclaimed. It has been a very much hoped for and very much defended and very much loved drug. So I'm going to be very careful to not step on the toes of the brilliant scientists who developed this drug and brought it to us and have brought so much healing into the world as a result. Meryl's story is unfortunately focuses on some of the harder parts of Keytruda, but the bottom line is that Meryl probably benefited more from her Keytruda than she was hurt by it. And so I just want to make sure from the very beginning to lay that out, that it is a good drug that has done good things in the world and is expected to do a lot more good. And probably it's a drug that's in the line among other immunotherapy drugs that are yet to come that will be even better. But for a certain part of the population, certain part of breast cancer population, it is a very promising drug that is holding more promise than drugs have held in many, many decades. It saved the life of our former president, Jimmy Carter, in 2015. He had metastatic melanoma, and it was thought to be not curative because nothing is proven to be curative yet in the cancer world, but certainly gave him a few more years to live. And that was really exciting. This drug was developed in Japan by a man called Tasuku Honjo, a researcher who was working on this for many, many decades, just like a lot of our American researchers have been doing with immunotherapy. Benefiting from each other mutually, I think, across the divide, across the oceans. He got the Nobel Prize for its development, and like I said, it started to be administered just recently, in the last 10 years, and in breast cancer patients, even more recent than that. The downside of Keytruda and the downside of many immunotherapy treatments is it can sometimes go overboard. So the idea behind Keytruda is that it's training your T cells, your immune cells, to recognize cancer where cancer would have otherwise gone undetected. So it's training the T cells to see it a little bit more clearly and identify the cancer cells and blast them, get rid of them, the way that our immune system is meant to do and the way that it usually does do. And that's why we don't get cancer more often than we do. But unfortunately, in many cases, the Keytruda as a drug is either too powerful and it makes our immune system too powerful, or there is some sort of translation difficulty in its administration to where it is also starting to attack healthy cells. And the main way that it does this in cancer patients is that it attacks the pancreas. And so there have been a lot of patients who have benefited from Keytruda but have ended up to be diabetic, so type 1 diabetic, because their pancreas is almost just completely useless after being attacked by the immune system. So Meryl's case, like she said, is very uncommon for her immune system to have turned on her salivary and mucus glands, but that's what happened to her. Her Keytruda caused her immune system to attack those glands that are moisture-causing glands that provide tears and saliva. and that's called Sjogren's syndrome. And it's a pretty common immunodisorder that happens later in life for most individuals. It's something that's pretty well known, but has not been highly associated with drugs like Keytruda or other immunotherapy drugs. So Meryl's case is pretty unique, and she'll probably be eager to find other patients that have had that happen as the years go by and this drug gets developed and changed, and maybe dosing requirements are changed. It is not something that unusual for us to find side effects to even the most helpful cancer drugs. They always have some side effects, whether they're small or they're large and devastating, as in Meryl's case. But science is seeking to correct all of those inefficiencies, all of those mistakes and failures along the way. And we've learned for, hundreds of years of science and exploration that we just don't get to the perfect spot right away. And it sometimes takes many, many years to do that. And I want this story to be told because other people might be experiencing Sjogren's as well after Keytruda. But at the same time, keeping everything in perspective, I'm still super grateful for this amazing, promising drug that will save lives, for sure, and has saved lives, many, many, many lives. And that's kind of the bottom line in the scientific community. We're trying to minimize harm while maximizing that curative kind of effect, which these immunotherapy drugs are so new, we don't know if we can call them a cure yet, but they could very well be a more permanent risk reduction that would someday maybe be called a cure. So switching from the subject of Keytruda and Sjogren's, before I switch, I want to just mention one resource. If you're interested in these kinds of immunotherapy drugs and the way they've been developed and the ongoing success of them, there's a really good book called Breakthrough by Charles Gruber that you might want to read. It's pretty readable. It just tells the whole story of the last 50 years of development of immunotherapy. It is definitely the field of cancer treatment that is the most promising right now. Chemotherapy is abysmal, in its effectiveness. It gives us a few years in the metastatic realm, if that, it doesn't give you very much life. But we're hoping that some of these immunotherapy drugs will add many, many more years to life for cancer patients, especially metastatic ones. So moving on to another topic of Meryl's interview that I was actually not even really expecting. We talked about her experience as a parenting coach, and she has an amazing amount of experience and knowledge to share. And I just wanted to repeat her website for those of you who need the reminder to look it up. I think she's going to be such a great parenting coach for cancer survivors. And her website is called rompandrolic with 2Ls.com. And you'll find her there. Of course, she is still recovering from the trauma of breast cancer and still undergoing lots of treatments and medical help at this point. So she may not be up and running in 2024, but if you're listening to this in 2025, I think she will be ramping up and really will love to hear from you. So I just want to plug that part of her life. I don't think she came on the podcast to plug that, but it worked out that she really proved herself as an expert in parenting with cancer. Meryl talks about the idea of disassociation in her processing of her emotions around cancer. And I just wanted to touch on this because this is something that is very real in our community. It would be silly of me to say that that is rare because I think it is more common than not. In order to get through the slash poison burn that we have adapted to as a norm in cancer treatment, which just isn't a normative thing for humans to do those things to themselves. Things that your intuition and your spirit really tends to fight. You kind of have to separate out, and that's what disassociation is. It's separating out from your body and from your feelings and becoming numb to them. And it is a necessary component of survival in these kinds of traumatic settings. And if you've been through disassociation, if you recognize that as something you've experienced, that is a good sign that you probably need professional help in the latter days of your journey out of breast cancer. And getting a good therapist can be hard. It can be hard to find the right one. But I urge you to keep at that struggle and to find someone that you trust and that's like really able to help you heal. I think coming back into our bodies and back into our emotions and letting ourselves feel them can be really scary, and it can involve a lot of processing. Talking out loud or writing or doing some kind of art usually helps a lot for me. But just know that that is not unusual, as strange and as foreign and as shameful as it might feel to admit that you've disassociated with regard to your cancer traumas. I think that you'll find that it is pretty typical for those, especially who have been through chemo and radiation, to willingly go in day after day, week after week, and let people put a kind of poison through your veins is not something that you can really sit through and live peacefully through by necessity. So your body and your spirit and your mind is doing you a favor by disassociating. And coming out of that and healing from that is not something that takes just a little time. It usually takes a number of years. And I love that Meryl was so unabashed in her admission of that, and just telling us she's still in the middle of the fight. She's still in the middle of that survival mode right now. Hopefully we'll have her on again and get to know the Meryl that is more settled and more recovered and at peace. But I love that she was able to bring who she is right now into the conversation and admit what she's going through so fully. I love that. I love that about the podcast, that we've had guests that were willing to be that honest and raw about where they're at. Finally, I want to touch on something that was a little unsettling for me in the interview. I know that Meryl said early in our interview that her tumor was growing fast and that made her uncomfortable. This could be really triggering for folks who are just diagnosed, and I want to make sure that you know that that is not the norm for breast cancer. For younger patients, it tends to be possible that they can have an aggressive and fast-growing cancer. That does not mean that yours is growing fast. Really talk to your doctor about it if you have any questions, and please trust them. They will know if that's the case. And it's not always the case. In fact, it's very rare for it to be the case. Just want to make sure and reiterate that, because I don't want this podcast to be a source of anxiety for anyone. Even if you're a young cancer patient, a breast cancer patient who's young, even if you have that quality that's true about you, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have an aggressive or fast-growing cancer. And your own doctor is the best one to go to about information about your situation. Don't go to the internet asking questions about your situation. Make sure and go to your oncologist. About all the things we talk about on this podcast, they are the expert in your case. Next Wednesday, I have an interview coming up with Marina Blackford. She is a fellow YouTuber and cancer influencer, and I'll talk to you then.